What's going on? Welcome back to Financial Journey. So today we're going to talk to you about Palantir. I want to go over some of the current data points, what is coming out this week that could cause some volatility, and when I would be a buyer of Palantir next. Before we get into any of that, make sure to hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So on Friday, it did go up 0.44%, very volatile. It did have a high of 25.57 and a low of 25.03. So you can tell based on the technicals, it does want to break out. My last several Palantir videos have said the exact same thing. All the technicals behind the scenes and everything, it does show that Palantir wants to break out. It just needs a good broad market catalyst. Palantir's been putting out a lot of good kind of small pieces of news, which is obviously going to amount to something big in the foreseeable future. But right now, I think the next big thing is rate cuts. And this week is a pretty big week. So you do have quite a lot of Fed speakers. So on Tuesday, you have Powell speaking. Even on Wednesday, Friday, more Fed speakers. A lot of consumer data coming out on Wednesday. So you do have ADP non-farm employment, as well as on Friday, you have non-farm payroll, and even just FOMC meeting minutes, and that's coming out on Wednesday, conveniently after the market does close. So the market closes at 1, and the FOMC meeting minutes is coming out at 2. So you kind of have a day and a half to digest exactly what is being said, but nonetheless, all of this is going to correlate to interest rate cuts, and that in reality is going to be the next big catalyst. More specifically, probably around the September meeting. So for the September 18th meeting, there is a 57.9% likelihood of a 25 basis point cut and a 6.2% likelihood of a 50 basis point cut. I think for the July one, that's kind of ruled out that nothing will really happen unless something dramatic does happen. And then for the November one, it looks like there's about 50% likelihood of a 25% cut or basis point cut, and then 25 or 24.2% of a 50 basis point cut. So in my opinion, I think that might be the next big catalyst for the broader market to propel a lot of stocks higher and give validity to Palantir to really move higher. Because like I said, it's really been wanting to break out. It just needs some reason. And right now the market is somewhat fickle. They're looking at a lot of companies and their multiples right now, as more and more companies are kind of failing to give future or good future guidance. So when it comes to analyst ratings, this is very resemblant based on that, right? Because you have some analysts that think $9 is acceptable, and same goes for 20. On the flip side, you do have a high of $35 that was done by Wedbush or Daniel Ives, who has a 54% success rating from Wedbush. So you have them all over the place. As a consensus though, $22.55 is anticipated, and surprisingly, this is one of the few stocks in the market that does represent a 11% downside. So the market just has always never really known what to really put a good appropriate multiple on Palantir. So when it comes down to it, that also could play as a negative. So depending on a lot of data points coming out in the next kind of month, for the most part, that could really hit the multiples. If companies continue to really miss on their earnings, buying power coming from consumers is going to diminish, and thus eventually trickle its way down to Palantir. So this is where, again, you just have to anticipate a lot of volatility when it comes down to Palantir. As of right now, the Elliott Wave technicals are projecting for it to kind of go to higher highs, as I mentioned. So it does have a pivot point of $22.80. For as long as Palantir is above that, it is anticipated to kind of hit that mid 27s to high 28s. And I think once it does hit that, then it's just a matter of time before it goes to kind of higher highs. And this would be a 52-week high, of course, for Palantir. So Palantir is becoming one of the 1% that is kind of hitting its 52-week highs. A lot of stocks seem to be pulling back. And so, yeah, it's going to be an interesting time period in the next little bit. As of right now, the latest Morningstar report does show the fair market value for Palantir being around $16. So I'm going to go over other data points before I kind of break it down on when I would be a buyer next. And I recently did buy at 21. And as I actually said in my last couple of videos, I know it sounds bad, but I really do like Palantir on a side note, but I'm never in love with any stock. So if I see opportunity on the downside, I short. So I've actually made more money shorting Palantir than I have on the long, again, for full transparency. So starting off with shorts. So on Friday, shorts did return 161,000 shares. 3.54% of the free float is being shorted, works out to be 68.19 million shares overall are being shorted. Utilization is 2.65%. So I'm just bringing this up as more of an analysis viewpoint because I do not see Palantir being a squeeze play by any means, but by shorts returning and it being a green day, whereas the broader market for the most part was red, kind of does validate that. So shorts do see more upside, and I think that is also at the same time linked to technicals. So obviously that's kind of playing a part. Looking at options, 17 million in calls, 4.39 million in puts. So you do see a lot of money getting into Palantir through options over this last little bit. 44% of all the options being done on Friday were bullish and optimistic. And of those call options, there's a consensus for it to be between that $26 and $27 range by the end of this upcoming Friday, so July the 5th. So a lot of optimism for that. And then on the flip side, more so anticipated to be sub 24.50. So you kind of have a lot of volatility that is kind of forecasted in the foreseeable future. You have seen a lot of institutions getting in and out of Palantir over this last little bit, with the exception of Friday. So a lot of big growth stocks have been rebalancing a lot of their portfolios this last week because that was the last week in Q2. So you saw abnormal amounts of transactions, except in Palantir's case. Friday, this right here is abnormally low. And like I said, Palantir in comparison to just the S&P and just other growth stocks is actually outperforming. So there was no need for ETFs who have fixed percentages of certain assets in their ETFs to rebalance. So in essence, like it kind of shows that Palantir is rather high. So once again, kind of playing into everything and the technicals. One thing as well I just wanted to bring up, so there hasn't really been any substantial analysis or anything like that, but there was this that was posted saying that why he just feels something is off. And it's just basically lack of innovation from the company itself. He kind of does reference indirectly just the multiple is too high, and that once the market does realize that it's just kind of a fancy software company, then it's going to be kind of given the same multiples as CRM, SAP, some things like that. So once again, I think just people do not know exactly where Palantir should truly be on the multiple level on the spectrum. But with it at $25.33, it is trading between this R1 and this R2. So $24.37 is that next strong support. On the flip side, $25.51 is that next strong resistance / target. And conveniently, it did bounce off of that on Friday. So once again, we do know that is a very strong resistance level, but with a lot of the data that's coming out, that could really push it to kind of higher highs, similar to where the Elliott wave technicals are projecting, or potentially to break it down. In my opinion, I do really like Palantir, like I said, but I think it's just too high based on just the market circumstances. So in my opinion, I would be a buyer between this, the S1 and the pivot range. So $20.66 and $22.51. When it was kind of flirting within this range, this pivot point right here was a kind of diamond support level. So that's very good, something to kind of rely on, at least in the foreseeable future. But I'm not one of those individuals that likes to FOMO into stocks, that likes to just kind of ride the wave higher, especially if it's not really justified in my opinion. And like I said, don't get me wrong, I really do like Palantir. I know it's a very big, innovative company, but I think it's too high for the market circumstances. So in my opinion, I think the technicals could definitely go higher, but at the same time, if there is a negative piece of news, then yes, you could see a kind of a pullback associated to that. So let me know your thoughts on Palantir. Give yourself a shout out. Have you been buying? Have you been selling? What have you been doing with Palantir? And one final thing, take advantage of this promo. Simply sign up for a new account, throw $100 at it, and they give you 5 free stocks. Each stock is valued up to $2,000. Kick-ass deal. Link in the description below and also the comments. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.